Hi everyone, David Nickel here, Earth Astrology. These are my astrology insights for the new moon in Gemini cycle starting today, the new moon on June 6th, and going through to the new moon in Cancer on July 5th. So at the start of this cycle, Gemini is the big influence, the major archetypal background. We have the sun and the moon and Venus and Mercury and Jupiter all in Gemini. So let's just talk about Gemini for a moment. Gemini is an air sign. Air signs relate to the mental plane. So Gemini is really very curious and adaptable and nimble energy. If you think of the element Mercury, when we say someone's mercurial or a mercurial um, description of something, it's think of Quicksilver that just moves in any direction without any resistance at all. And relates to function is to keep us from getting fixed in any dogma, any fixed point of view. Gemini is always, it relates to the developmental stage when children are asking questions all the time. That kind of innocence, that kind of true not knowing, but wanting to learn, wanting to find out. This is Gemini at its best, is it puts us into the not knowing in beginner's mind, a state of consciousness where true learning can happen. And what I find with Gemini, what I've always found with Gemini is it can be experienced as a kind of restless energy, but if it's allowed fully, often the it can feel almost like it's wired and can make people feel anxious and restless, but often that anxiety comes when we're suppressing it, when we've had the idea that we shouldn't move in all of these different directions. But when we actually allow the movement, it's of Gemini, it's pure joy, it's pure bliss. And personally, I'm Sun in Capricorn, so Gemini is a little bit foreign to me. It's not the easiest for a Capricorn, a structured Capricorn, to move in that completely zip, 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 zip sort of way that Gemini likes to do. But I do have an admiration for it. And um, there can it can seem as if there's that it's random, that it's totally random, the movement of Gemini, but it has this deep sort of organic method. Like it's the movement of Gemini is meant to connect all the different dots, all of the various perspectives with each other. It's Gemini is the movement between all the perspectives. And in doing this movement, it actually is there's a sort of crazy method that is underneath it all. Um, and this deep function of helping all of the different perspectives recognize themselves as part of a greater whole. Although that movement to recognize the greater whole is more Sagittarius, the opposite, but Gemini sort of does the groundwork for that. So this is the flavor that we're in, and this is the opportunity, is to be open-minded and curious. And there's a big opportunity here to let new ideas in. If we let go, if we can be that open. So having said that, today's new moon is square Saturn. So the sun and the moon and Venus are all in a triple conjunction in Gemini. And that energy on its own is very nice. Sun, Moon, Venus together on its own is a sweet, loving energy, but it's squaring to Saturn. So Saturn in a square to all those planets in Gemini can manifest as hard communication. You might have to make a hard communication or receiving difficult news. Saturn brings to that Gemini communication function this constriction or challenge or work. And it's like something needs to be restructured. Saturn is the drive for structure, and it's in conflict here somehow with the drive for creative self-expression, which is the Sun, and the drive for harmony, which is Venus. So there's some conflict there and some restructuring that needs to take place. We're still we're just in the Jupiter has just moved into Gemini, on May 26th. So we're still really getting used to this. Jupiter will be in Gemini for a whole year. So when it moves into a new sign, it's like a whole new chapter. So all of these other faster moving planets will move on fairly soon, quite quickly out of Gemini. But Jupiter will stay there for the whole month. I mean, the whole year. And so Jupiter in Gemini is whatever Jupiter touches, it expands. So this Gemini energy of beginner's mind, of being open to learning and new ideas, bringing through curiosity. Jupiter will bring a lot of new ideas, big ideas. Jupiter's also about faith in a higher power, faith in the fundamental benevolence of the source of reality. And so there's this sense that there's easy access to this higher wisdom that can come through the mental plane, that we can have faith in our ideas. It can bring in a kind of optimism about our ideas. Big ideas, expansive ideas, optimistic ideas. But it's like, as I feel it, it's like we're still getting used to this flavor. It's just come in. And the very essence of this energy is like, first we have to empty our mind from what we know. First, we have to be willing to not know, to be in that state of innocence. We have to ask questions without knowing the answer, and making ourselves available in that way, making ourselves empty, and having faith that the ideas will come. The ideas will come in time. So when Jupiter entered Gemini on May 26th, it immediately entered into a powerful trine with Pluto in Aquarius. And this is a really potent transit, big energies, both Jupiter and Pluto. And here you have Jupiter's expansiveness and wisdom, drive for wisdom and faith, in an auspicious, harmonious connection with the Pluto drive for transformation. And so what this can mean is there's an opportunity here to really bring in this sense of deep trust in the process of transformation. So whatever the Plutonic transformation is, that journey into the dark of bringing the light of consciousness into the dark. And in Aquarius, it's like bringing a transformation for the future, for bringing something new into the world. And with Jupiter in a trine from Gemini, it can mean that we have this chance to really trust that whatever transformative processes we're in, no matter how difficult they are, that they will lead us to the inspiration that we're looking for. So that's what's available here with Jupiter trine Pluto. On the 9th of June, Mars moves from Aries to Taurus. Mars is at home in Aries and not so much at home in Taurus. Taurus is very slow, earthy, more feminine energy that likes comfort and security, and Mars likes to take action. So its actions tend to be slower here and more at the pace of the earth, so a slower, steadier rhythm. And it could be the kind of time where we're required to surrender more to the slower natural rhythms of the earth. And that bravery of Mars, the fighting energy of Mars, it's like it's applied for peace. Whatever battles we need to fight there, in relation to fight for peace, for our security, for the right to have that serenity. So around June 8th to 12th, so pretty much following the new moon in Gemini on the 6th, with that challenging square to Saturn, we do have a very intense transit of Mars squaring Pluto. Mars will be in Taurus on June 9th, and in square to Pluto in Aquarius for a few days. Mars square Pluto is a very intense, challenging energy. You've got Mars represents the drive to survive. It's the survival instinct. And in a square with Pluto, it's like it's in conflict with the Pluto drive to transform, to change, to bring what's in the dark into the light. And so here we've got Mars in Taurus, which is like this, bringing this survival energy into like, I will fight for the right to not change. That's Taurus, that's stubbornness. And it's in conflict with Pluto and Aquarius, which is, I'm going to compel change towards the future. So you can imagine what those energies feel like together. It doesn't really get more intense. That's a fight. We could see that play out in the world in challenging ways. But it's always a higher octave to any challenging transit. And with Mars and Pluto, it's something like the bravery to be willing to go through this death rebirth portal and to submit to that with bravery, with courage. And the enlivening that comes from that. Like, it's a very difficult energy, and most of us in our modern world have a very comfortable life, and when we don't tend to put ourselves in those sort of situations very much, where we have to go through that kind of intensity, right? But the archetypally, this is the window that is here, and so there is nonetheless this need on some level to if we're going to align ourselves with the opportunity to face into that challenge, and in whatever way that plays out for each one of us, to be willing to bring that bravery into some kind of death that can then lead to a kind of renewal. And um, we also have in our favor that Jupiter trine Pluto at the same time, which as I was saying, brings that sense of trust in the power of transformation. So that's actually working with us. We have the challenge of the square of Mars, the intensity of that. But somewhere in there too, we have Jupiter's wisdom and faith saying to us, it's okay. At the end of the day, even if it's hard, the universe is good. It's moving us in the right direction. And so it can support us to move through what could be an intense crucible near the start of this cycle. So after we get through this intense passage near the start of this cycle, we will start to, the energies will shift. We start to move more toward Cancer as the dominant backdrop, base note. On June 17, Mercury and Venus move into Cancer. And then on June 20th, the Sun, which is the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, and the winter solstice in the Southern. And solstice, of course, is always a powerful time for ceremony, a peak time, powerful portal. And this year, that time is especially powerful. The very next day, there is a full moon in Capricorn. So, full moon in Capricorn bring in this grounded energy, um, at a time to be thinking about our goals and the structures of our lives. And both the full moon in Capricorn and at the time of the solstice on the 20th, the sun is in a square to Neptune. And at the full moon, the sun and the moon in a square to Neptune. So it's just something to be mindful of when there's a square to Neptune. It can mean the sun square Neptune is like the drive for self-expression. The sun is in some sort of conflict with the drive for transcendence, which is Neptune. And so it can be a time of idealism, but also you want to be mindful of not getting overly idealistic and unrealistic. With the full moon, that's like the full moon in Capricorn, the drive for structure and order and discipline in our lives is in some way in conflict with this drive for transcendence and unity and enlightenment. And but the higher octave of that transit, that opportunity, is how can we in some way transform our goals and the structures of our lives so that they are supportive of our enlightenment drive? How can they be more permeable to the divine will, the grounded structures of our lives and the goals that we have? So the other main developments in this cycle that I want to focus on is that Saturn and then Neptune will both go retrograde. So Saturn goes retrograde on June 29th, Neptune on July 3rd. And let's just talk about this for a moment. Saturn retrograde is retrograde 1/3 of the year. So this happens every year. And when Saturn goes retrograde, Saturn is like the lord of karma. And so it's like whatever we've done during the time of it being direct, like if we've made good efforts towards our goals that are aligned with reality, then we can get rewarded. But it can also be a reality check in the other way. it's like the ultimate reality principle being brought down to earth. And we might also need to revisit a structure that we've created in order to understand how it needs to be changed so it can stand the test of time. Saturn is about time. Um, so, um, so Saturn is the reality check. Um, and then Neptune, when Neptune moves retrograde, Neptune goes retrograde for 40% of the time. So it's also, it's not uncommon. And one of the things about Neptune going retrograde is it can have this effect of removing the veils of illusion. When Neptune is moving forward, one of its trickier qualities is that we can get a little bit caught up in, it's like we can see the world and see ourselves through rose-colored glasses a little. And when Neptune goes retrograde, it becomes weaker. And so that those veils sort of fall away and we can be left face to face with reality as it is, which might not be as pretty as we had thought. So, with both Saturn and Neptune going retrograde one after the other, we might have to face into reality. We might have to see some things that are a little harsh. And by the end of this cycle, so Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto will all be going retrograde. And this year I've been paying a little bit more attention to what does it really feel like when you have a lot of planets moving forward versus more planets in retrograde. We had from the end of January through to the end of April, or maybe it's the beginning of April, all planets were moving forward. And I don't know if you remember that period as I did, but it was very exciting. There was a lot of sudden forward movement, a lot of momentum, a lot of connections, new ideas, and things moving forward, but kind of at breakneck speed. And I started to realize why the universe is constructed the way it is, so that we have these periods of planets moving forward and then retrograde, because after a while you start to feel like, geez, they were just moving forward all the time, it just gets too much. Just how can you keep up? We need to have these periods where we get to take a breath. And so we're coming into that phase here soon where the pace will shift and there's going to be more, maybe less opportunity or less excitement around that fast paced, everything actually going forward. But, a little bit of relief in a sense on the system, time to now more review and revise and reflect. We're starting to enter more into that kind of time. And that's the highlights from me for this month. I hope you have a great month, and I look forward to seeing you for New Moon in Cancer. Bye for now.